Hi, my name is Juliana Zooks, and welcome to Hidden Treasures on Ancestry. I'm the senior family historian at Ancestry on the research team, and I've been working for the company for 22 years. I love talking about the collections that we have. They're amazing. We only get to touch on a few of them today, so let's get started. Um, you hate to say one of your favorite records is a mortality schedule. Only a genealogist would say that, right? But it really is, they're important records, even if your ancestor didn't die in the year before the census, which is what the mortality schedules cover. They cover all the deaths in the previous year. You can learn a lot from them. For example, in 1849, there was a huge cholera epidemic, and it impacted cities across the country. So in Chicago, for example, it killed 1 in 36 of the entire population of the city. This is an 1850 mortality schedule for Chicago, and you can see all of the cholera deaths here. So it's important to remember that this happened because, number one, your ancestor lived through this epidemic. So that's part of their story. But number two, a lot of times when you have these epidemics, especially in large cities, a lot of the population that had the wherewithal or had a place to go would flee the city because they didn't want to get it. So if your ancestor disappeared for a while, that might be a reason. If you look and you see that, okay, there was all kinds of cholera going on at that time and I can't find my ancestor in the census, so where he should be. So that's something that it'll help explain some things and also adds to your family story. Also, non-population schedules. These are our ag schedules, our agricultural schedules, industry, manufacturing, social statistics. A lot of people I hear talk about, I have farming ancestors and they're boring. I don't have any stories about them. These can help you give you the stories about your ancestors. It talks about, did they own or rent? What was the value of the products they had? Did they lose livestock to weather, disease, and other things? And so seeing the value of everything. And then what you can do is if you can get two of them in a row, you can start comparing, how did this family's, economic life change? Did they do better the next decade or did they do worse? It's particularly interesting to look at during the Civil War between 1860 and 1870. How did people's lives change? So this is part of the story, and it's also kind of interesting just to see what your ancestor grew, what kind of livestock they had. So something cool to look at. And the industry and manufacturing schedules are very similar. So you can pretty much use the same methodology. We also have state censuses. The Iowa state census is what we love, called the mother lode. It gives us the name, relationship to the head of household, color, age, marital status, home ownership, value or rent, citizenship, number of years in the US, number of years in Iowa, which is great for tracking migration, education level, literacy, and that's just page 1. Page 2 gives the place of birth, also the father's name, his place of birth and age, mother's maiden name, her place of birth and age, and then where the parents were married. So these are pieces of information I've never seen in one particular record all at once. Page 3 talks about military service, occupation, number of months unemployed, which is something that we often overlook in some of the regular census records too. Some of the regular population schedules include unemployment type of information because that impacted your family. And religious affiliation, which of course is important for finding church records. We have naturalization records and indexes on Ancestry. These are particularly interesting, especially if you're looking in the post-1906 era. Naturalizations before 1906 tended to be a little leaner. It wasn't standardized. So it depended on what court and how much information they kept. But when you get into the post era, and especially like this is a post 1929, you start getting the photographs too. But you can see the information here. This is Elizabeth Zooks, and Szojc is actually the Hungarian pronunciation for Zooks. So it looks like she was changing her name, the spelling of her name, so that people would pronounce it right. but address, occupation, all kinds of information, her husband, where she was from, all kinds of details about her children, their dates of birth. And then over here, we've got when she arrived. She sailed out of Bremen, arrived in New York on the Neckar in 1908. So a lot of information. Now you can use that information to go after a passenger list. So a lot of details in here are a launching pad to other records. We also have World War II draft cards. We have both the young men, and then we also have the 1942 collection of what they call the old man's draft, which it wasn't really exactly a draft. It was more of a survey of the workforce power among older men that were born after April 28th, 1877 and before February 16th, 1897. So it's going to contain similar information to what you see here on Jimmy Stewart's card. But you can see there's a lot of great details on here too. You've got birth date, place of birth. You've got all kinds of the person who will always know your address. That was his father. And so you've got his father and his father's address on there, occupation. And then there's physical description over here. Of course, we all know what Jimmy Stewart looks like. But we have 1890 veteran schedules from the U.S. federal census. Unfortunately, only Kentucky through Wyoming, part of Kentucky through Wyoming is available. Some of the records were lost, and then there are some sorted posts. But the nice thing about these records too is that it's going to give you their military attachment. If you ever tried to go for a Civil War pension file, you look at the pension index and you've got all these candidates, but if you don't have some kind of identifying information, like maybe the wife's name's listed, something that's going to identify that person as your John Rudolph, having all these details here is what's going to help you, because that's included on those index cards as well. Always remember too, when you go to look at a record, you want to look all the way around the record. At the bottom of the page, sides, make sure there's not 2 pages, page forward, because a lot of records are multiple pages. So this is a really good example of why, because most, you may look and say, okay, there's my guy on this line here, and then you don't look further down, and here's where a lot of the good stuff is. This is where you have their address, and that's going to help prove that that's the right person. You have information about disabilities. For example, excuse me. Excuse me, John had his horse shot out from under him and 3 ribs broken. So there's a little bit of his story there from the war. You've got other people who, this guy lost his right leg at the Battle of Antietam. There was a gunshot wound to the right arm. And the last gentleman here deserted from the Confederate Army and enlisted in Company E, Captain Holmes' company. So there's a little something for your Civil War story, right? And speaking of the stories of our veterans, you look at state records, state level records. We have a lot of collections that are on the state level. We tend to think of military and we go right to the federal records, but there are a lot of collections that the states put together afterwards. This, for example, this is from the Kansas Historical Society. We have several similar collections. I think New Mexico and California have collections that are like this. But you've got them soliciting letters from parents, and they've sent photographs and newspaper clippings and letters like this. This is from Virgil Berkebile. But anyways, it's from his parents, and it talks about him and where he grew up, and he attended school and all that kind of thing. He attended school until he joined his country's colors. So a lot of really great insights, and this is spoken from the heart, from the family. So these are really moving collections. Another thing we tend to overlook, and there are thousands of these books on Ancestry, are local histories. Local histories can give you some really great insights into migration patterns, into the events that were happening in your ancestors' county that you're not going to find in the history books. So these are the things that even if your ancestor doesn't appear in there, they're going to give you so much context about what was going on in that area, and you'll be able to pick out things, oh, that would have impacted my ancestor. So, and even if your ancestor wasn't wealthy, a lot of times you will find mentions of them in there. If they did something impressive, or if they were prominent in some way, there's a lot of chance that you can get them. This is about the Germans in Indianapolis. And so it talks about the migration of Germans into Indianapolis. So a lot of things you can learn from local histories, and I'll tell, these are a little harder to find, so I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. We also have city directories. We have, there's, I think 1.5 billion was the last time I looked, in the city directories that we have on Ancestry. And so these are really great records, because not only are they going to place your ancestor, they're a great way to like track your ancestor year by year between the censuses, but also look for other things in there. Look for advertisements. If your ancestor was in business, there's a good chance he might have advertised in a city directory. Look for church listings to see what churches are available were open in the area, and which churches were closest to them that they were most likely to attend. What cemeteries were around at that time. You can go and get this inventory of all of these things that are available. They were the guide to our ancestors' guide to their city, but they're also our guide to their city. So, and their city as it was in that day. So don't overlook this collection, and it's well worth browsing some of these too. They're alphabetical. You can go and find the table of contents pretty easily, and then start browsing around and see what types of things are in there that you can use. So let's talk a little bit about finding records with, let's talk about using the card catalog first. One thing to know about the card catalog is if you're doing a title search, it's going to search for terms in the database title only. So you can see I searched for Illinois, and every single one of these databases that comes up when I do that search has Illinois in the title. If you do a keyword search, you're going to get a broader set of results. You can see here I searched for Brooklyn, and the first results don't have Brooklyn anywhere in the title, but when I hover it over it, I can see that there is Brooklyn is included in this marriage index. So because it's included in the description, the keyword is going to pick it up. So like I said, you're going to get a broader set of results if you use the keyword. If you want to tighten it up, use a title search. I think one of the best ways to search, though, is to filter by either the record collection, what type of record you're looking for. Am I looking for vital records? And then put in the location. For example, I've done birth, marriage, and death here. And from birth, marriage, and death, there's even an option you can narrow it to just births or just marriages or just deaths. So as you're focusing your research questions and things like that, and you're going, okay, what record do I need for this? I can go, okay, a birth record will give me this information, and I can go and focus on just what birth records are available. But also location, you can also use the time frame. You can separate it by a decade or a century. So you could say, okay, I only want birth records from the 1940s. And that would only give you collections that include the 1940s in them. Another way to look at our collections is to look at our place pages. And in the place pages, you could go to the search tab up here, and then down at the bottom of the page, you've got this map. And you can explore by location by different countries too. But go in and you select a state, and it's going to take you to a page like this. And here you can go in and look. This is kind of our greatest hits, the top 5 or whatever of this collection. So you can go through. We always want to look at view all, though, because there's more to it than just this. So for Michigan, there's actually 29 collections, but we're only showing you the top 5 right here. So these are like probably the largest collections that we have. but it's a great way to go through. And the other thing I really like to use this page for too is to kind of brainstorm. If I'm looking at a research problem and I'm like, okay, I don't know, I don't know what we have that could help me solve this problem. This is a great way to go through and browse the relevant collections that you think might help you with your research question. And then when you go through, you could see some of the things like, oh, I never knew this collection was there. And so I like to go through, if I'm working at a case, especially we work on cases that are from all over the country. The first thing I do is go through and go, okay, what do we have for this state? Kind of refresh my memory and say, okay, these are the records that I have at my disposal. And so I keep this open so that I can go through as I'm working the case, I can go through and look and see, okay, what else can I use in here? And because sometimes the most powerful search is when you go directly to the collection and search it directly, because that way you're weeding out all these other things, all the census and all the other noise that you can tend to run across. But yeah, so you want to view all to look at that. And one other thing I wanted to point out on this page at the bottom here is that we have a little list of special collections. We've got African American collections, American Indian collections, Jewish family history records. We have a collection for New York's 400th anniversary that's basically focused on all New York records. And we've got a really fantastic Quaker collection. If you've got Quaker ancestors, I'm totally jealous because they kept such fantastic records. But each of these special collections, when you go to the pages, some of them will have a list, a sampling of some of the records that are available. Some of them will also have, most of them actually will also have a reference guide, something that's going to help you navigate. For example, the Jewish family history, I think Gary Mokotov wrote a little section for us on beginning your Jewish family history research. So we have some similar things for the Quaker collections too. The Quaker, we have a really good guide in there that on their landing page that you can download, and it helps you understand Quaker records. But anyway, so I hope this will inspire you to go out and do a little bit of digging and do a little bit of looking to see if you can find something new that you haven't explored before on Ancestry, because I would bet that once you go in and start looking at some of these collections, you're going to find some things that you didn't even know were out there. I've been working for the company for 22 years, and I still go out there and find things that I didn't even know were out there. They kind of snuck them out there on me and I didn't pay attention. But anyways, thank you for coming. I really appreciate you listening, and I wish you a lot of success on Ancestry. Have a great day.